As you would expect, Invictus is very well represented here at the Genoa Boat Show, and that gives us a really useful opportunity to help distinguish between their two key ranges, the TT and the GT. And if I squeeze myself into here, we'll see a pair of 280 models. Here we've got the TT, and as you can see, it's deep decked, walk around, open day boat. Over here we have the GT with its quite fulsome elevated deck mouldings, its forward sunbathing platform and some decent accommodation down below. It's the GT model we're here to see. If we walk around this way, past the really majestic looking TT 460 there, that incidentally is the Invictus flagship, and as you can see, it's drawing plenty of admiring crowds. We'll squeeze our way around the back and we'll see the boat we've actually come here to see. It's interesting because it's the GT320, and rather than being the inboard model we've already seen, it's the outboard variant of that, so it gets the S suffix, hence GT320S. It's just over here. We'll fight our way through. There we are. As you can see, equipped with a pair of outboards there, Yamaha F300s in this case, and it has in common with that GT line that lovely elevated foredeck, a good bit of accommodation below, and all of that without in the slightest bit compromising the beautiful looks for which Invictus has become so well known. Step on board and it's immediately evident that Invictus likes to keep the raw practicalities of boating tucked neatly out of the way. At this aft platform you can see we have the waste outlet on the starboard side. We also have the shore power tucked neatly on the aft edge of that cockpit bench, and in the side of the cockpit bench we've got the water filling point plus the transom shower and a little mixer tap to adjust the temperature there. Now it is an outboard powered boat rather than the inboard version of course, but you do have this neat little platform that hinges up, so you can drop that down to get across to the other side, no problem at all. Enjoy a proper swim platform in spite of the outboard propulsion, where you can lift it up to trim your engines out. And incidentally, how neat and tidy is this modern Yamaha engine installation? It's a beautiful thing. Let's close that back up again. On this port side, which is the side we use to enter the cockpit, we have a little lift up hatch and a drop down ladder there. There's no gate here. It's a very open deck, a very welcoming deck. As you move into here, what's really conspicuous is the fact that there's almost no furniture here to speak of. What we do have is an L-shaped seating unit to starboard with some really lovely classical Invictus detailing. The fabrics are very attractive indeed. This is a kind of baggage style motif they got going on with their cushions here. And the backrest, as you can see, are lovely and sculpted, quite sculptural, quite artistic looking. We tried very hard with the style, as they always do. Now you see on the leading edge of this aft bench we've got a pair of brackets for table legs. What we have here is just a single compact circular table, leaving all this deck space wide open and free. But you can also fit a pair of legs, one in there and one in there, for a rectangular table that sits across that space and measures around about 1.5 meters in length, just over. So it fills that space quite nicely. That doesn't actually drop down into place to create a sun pad, because we have, as I shall show you in a second, in fact I'll pop up there and show you now, because we have such an enormous sunbathing spot up there in the bow. But they are investigating the idea of not an infill, but an inflatable infill. So you don't have to mess around with rigid brackets and additional cushions. It's basically an inflatable section that sits on the deck, inflates to the height of the rest of the cushions and turns this aft area into a proper sunbathing lounging area without taking up much storage space or causing much fuss. So that's quite an interesting solution, and they're thinking about introducing that same thing down below in the forward cabin, as we'll see in a minute. But of course, because this is such a deck intensive boat, because they want to really maximize space rather than cluttering everything up with additional furniture modules, this is the only boat in the entire fleet, with the sole exception of that enormous TT460 flagship, that comes with an open inside gate for easy access into this cockpit space. In terms of storage back here in the cockpit, we have a big underdeck space that I'll show you right now. It's the primary space really for bulky items on this boat. And of course, because there is an inboard version of this boat, as you would expect, the space is pretty enormous. Full beam, and the vast majority of it is available to use specifically for storage. There's not much in the way of mechanical equipment in here. What we do have though, if I just pop back out and look at the forward edge of that space, is a dedicated bracket for that larger rectangular table. If you want to stow the circular one away and use some of that vast expanse of deck space for a bigger dinner party. There we are. And everything on this boat has its own natural place to go. Nothing just rattles around. It's very carefully thought through in that regard. There are also storage spaces underneath both benches, and if I just lever that up and take a little look, you'll see that they're nicely lined as well. Nicely lined spaces and drained as well. Proper trays in there, which is a nice touch. And then at that central wet bar itself, we lift the big heavyweight lid. Happily, it's got equally heavyweight rams, so it lifts without a problem. We've got an electric grill, a big electric grill, that's optional, on the starboard side, and a stainless steel sink to port. Now you can spec this instead as an induction hob. Either way, we have a good size of fridge beneath it with its own little freezer compartment, as you can see. Plus a big bin on the port side with multiple compartments for your recycling, and a little storage space in the centre, currently filled with the shore power leads and lines. Here as elsewhere, you get this very classy, very classical kind of off-white colour that Invictus seems to love. And actually one of the key options we're looking at on this boat, if I look a little bit more closely, is this sort of pale metallic green. Again, a very classical colour from Invictus's palette of classical colours. And it works a treat on a boat like this, goes really well. It's also worth noting, in fact, that they've taken this stylistic motif to such impressive extremes that the twin Yamaha F300s on the transom of this boat are that same kind of off-white colour, and have kind of been relabelled with Invictus. There's no brash numbers to illustrate the horsepower on the cowlings either. Again, a very cool and classy touch. As you move towards the bow, past lovely thick sculptural guardrails on all sides, you take a couple of steps up there, 1, 2, an additional step up there onto the foredeck itself. Now, of course, they've done that to generate extra volume down below, and we'll see how that looks in a second. But the first thing to note up here, of course, is the fact that there's no peripheral walkway. They haven't wasted any time with that. They haven't kind of cordoned off the sunbathing cushions in the centre and then flanked them with side decks. This is 100% sunbed. Every square inch of space up here is used for exactly that. The detailing's lovely. We've got a couple of cup holders and little storage trays on either side of this lovely central cushion, this headrest. But you can, instead of those, spec this boat as various others in the Invictus fleet, and I've seen these before, they're rather lovely. You can spec this boat with, again, really beautiful sculptural looking speakers for the people up here in the foredeck, and it's an option I would certainly look at taking. As you look at this space, you might justifiably wonder where the anchor is and how you actually operate it. Well, we've got a little fold-up flap here in the bow that just about gives you access. Again, as a seamanship practicality, it's not foregrounded on this boat. This boat is about refinement and luxury and feeling like you've invested in something that's going to improve your life, and an anchor is not necessarily that. But when you open it up, there it is. We've obviously got the controls right here, plus the remote at the helm, and the anchor sits on the lower side of that axe-shaped bow, out of the way without spoiling the lines. And the anchor line and chain, that's underneath the winch obviously, and the only means of accessing that is by this little hatch there. So that's quite a difficult thing to achieve. But as I say, this boat is about foregrounding the luxuries rather than the seamanship practicalities, and it does a very effective job in that regard. Let's put that back down. Now you've got some lovely teak inserts recessed into these mouldings. That looks a treat, and the cleats themselves are rather lovely. It's important to recognise that actually, I'm told about 98% of everything you see on this boat is put together in Invictus's manufacturing facility in the south of Italy, and the only exceptions to that are the steelwork that you see here and some of the fabrics. Though they're not actually put together in their factory, they are sourced from within Italy, so it's 100% Italian brand, and they're very proud of that fact. One thing I also like here is the fact that we have a kind of undercut base for this wet bar, which means that clumsy people like me are less likely to stub their toes. And we also have lovely curved edges. There's not a corner in sight, so you're not going to bash your hip or crack an elbow on the way past as you move around this boat. It's a very easy boat to navigate with comfort. When we reach the helm station, you can see there is easily enough space here for 3 seats, but they've used 2 large ones, 2 very plush ones, each with a nice stainless steel armrest and the same kind of sculptural loveliness in the backrest as we've seen further aft. And we have bolsters that, let me just lift that down. Oh, there we are. Bolsters that can be set in 3 positions. Either you sit it down as a seat, you lift it right up as a conventional bolster, or there's a lock mechanism halfway up, so you can lean smaller your back inside this little recess. So that's a nice touch too, and it's a useful one actually, because there's no adjustability built into this steering wheel, so the more you're able to adjust your helm seat, the more comfortable you're likely to be. In the centre between these 2 helm seats, we have a lovely little automotive style leather glove box with a pair, I think, a pair of USB chargers for your phone. Has a little magnetic strip hidden behind that leather. It feels very, very high quality. A trio of cup holders. And when we step into the helm position, it's not an enormous dash space. There's room for a couple of Garmin chart plotters. I think, what are they, about 10-inch or so. And we also have a big tray behind the compass on the top edge with 4 more cup holders. Aside from that, all we really have is a couple of little ledges, symmetrical ledges, one on either side of that central steering wheel. The right one, of course, is occupied by the twin throttles with some additional switch gear. That means there's no real space over there for the trim tabs, so they're relegated to a position over at your left hand, where there's also space for the controls for your bow thruster. Visibility, of course, is very good though, particularly in this standing position where you look right over that wraparound one-piece screen. And if I sit myself all the way down, Well, a boat often changes its fore and aft attitude when you're up on the plane, of course. So this is not fully illustrative. But as I look through that screen, quite often you get a little bit of warping when you've got a kind of wraparound screen like this. But there's very little evidence of that here. And it's quite nicely tinted too, as you can see. Let's make our way down into the cabins and see what all those foredeck steps create down below. Well, firstly, when you step down here on the port side, we have an even larger fridge and freezer compartment than up at that cockpit galley. We also have a really good bit of storage built in here, hanging storage. But very much like the aft cockpit, this forward-most part of the accommodation feels almost quite indulgent and selfish for a kind of cruising couple who really want to enjoy themselves. So it's kind of a permanent lounge set up down here. I'm told, as I suggested perhaps earlier, that there might be an inflatable infill to turn this into a guest bed, into a double berth. But as things stand, as you can see, it's very much a lounge area, a dedicated lounge area, again with a slot for a table to sit in there. And to starboard, we have a nice little storage unit for cutlery, for dishes, for glasses and so on. There's no option for a galley down here, so you have to use that galley up top. So it's more about weekending really than cruising, I would have thought, but they do tell me that a lot of their customers use this boat for a week at a time and live on board quite happily. If we move forward, even in the forwardmost part of the bow, if I turn the camera around, you see you still got, what, 3 or 4 inches above my head, despite the, more than that in fact, maybe 6, despite the fact that we've got that sunbathing platform on the foredeck. Of course, the absence of additional wraparound side decks, a walk-around configuration on that foredeck, means that it's quite a regular space up here. There's no substantial dip anywhere in this area, so it's a very comfortable place to sit and relax. Again, the details are quite interesting here too. All of that classical luggage style fabric detailing, recessed ambient LEDs. I think maybe blinds would feel a little bit more modern than these sort of netting curtains, but the enormous hull windows you don't quite realise because they're so tinted when you look at it from the outside. But big panoramic hull windows that are perfectly positioned to put the horizon in your eye line when you lounge on these seats. More detailing with the lights here, and these are extraordinarily elaborate, maybe over elaborate lights that drop down from the deck head there. And if we move further aft, there's no storage beneath this deck, I should say, because that's for the batteries and the bow thruster and so on. But we have a starboard day heads that also, as you can see, doubles as a wet room with its pumps down there under that panel. There's a little mirror section here that partly obscures that opening porthole, but you do get decent ventilation. And it's, though not particularly spacious, it's spacious enough for day boating and weekending applications. What's more impressive though is the scale of the mid cabin, which is open plan, not least because of course we have that permanent lounge in the bow. So this double, as you can see, is full beam pretty much. We just have shelving units built into either side. I'd like to see these lined with some fabric so that you're not bumping your shoulder on cold wood in the middle of the night, but it's certainly a good scale. We have storage beneath these sections built in, as you can see, nice regular shaped storage, plus additional opening portholes there, so you can get a bit of ventilation in. And beneath the bed itself here, we lift up this cushion, you'll see a peculiarly shaped spot, but this is exactly the recess where the cockpit table goes, the circular cockpit table, when you choose to get the rectangular one out instead. So as I say, everything here has its space, nothing is left to rattle around, so that's nice. So there you have it, that's the GT320S. It's arguably more about the owners than it is about the indulgence of their guests. And it's certainly more about style than it is about outright practicality. But you'd expect nothing less from Invictus, and in fact you'd be disappointed if they gave you anything different. Now this boat could be yours for about 331,000 euros including tax. That's a base price from figure, or for the show boat with its various extras like the grille and the underwater lighting and the pale metallic green paint, like the VHF and the thruster and the hard top, the trim tabs, all these various bits and bobs. That can be yours for 429,000 euros including tax, which increases the base price by about 100,000 euros. It's not going to be for everyone, but if it's the kind of boat you're after, a really indulgent, very stylish, outboard powered day boat with overnighting accommodation, it's a very difficult boat not to like.